This is Edgar Schiffley. At the time, he was a 33-year-old Dutch bowler. He couldn't really bat. In fact, in 30 ODIs, he averaged 10. In T20 cricket at this point, he was playing his 5th match, and he had only ever batted once before in T20, and he'd made no runs from his 3 balls. His first ever runs had come a few balls before, and bowling to this older Dutch non-batter was Stuart Broad. Test Match Sofa once described him as the Arian Petri dish. You know, tall, fast, could bat, bred from another Test cricketer, like he was designed specifically to be good at cricket. And Schiffley was an associate bowler who would only make 2 more runs in T20 cricket after this time. But it wasn't completely one-sided. At the other end, the Dutch had Ryan ten Doeschate, still their best batter they've probably ever had, and the Dutch needed 7 runs from 6 balls with 4 wickets in hand. That's good maths. So all things considered, at the start of the over, it was Broad who was the outsider, the underdog. And so with his mad scientist brain, he decides to bowl right arm around the wicket to essentially bowl wide Yorkers, for they're in fashion really, knowing that the Dutch are going to try and hit every ball to the leg side. And his first ball, Broad wins the battle. Ten Doeschate bunts it back to him and runs, and Broad misses the run out. In the next delivery, similar ball, similar result, but this time Broad decides to take the ball to the stumps himself, a la Jonty Rhodes. And he does, but when the umpire's checking if it is out or not, it turns out that his dive dislodged the bail. 2 runs, 2 balls, 2 run-out chances. Next ball, batter and bowler spice it up a little bit. Broad delivers a full toss, Ten Doeschate mishits a catch back to Broad, Broad drops that. So now we've had 3 balls, 3 missed chances, 3 singles. 4th ball, Schiffley misses a wide Yorker. Foster flicks it at the stumps. Broad fumbles mid-pitch before turning and throwing at his end. 4 balls, 4 missed chances, 4 singles. The 5th ball, Broad misses his length to Ten Doeschate, who tries to hit the cover off it and gets another single. The first time that there wasn't actually a chance. So now, from the last ball of this game between England, who invented the sport, and the Dutch, who did not, it is the orange team who need 2 runs to win, and Stuart Broad is bowling to Edgar Schiffley again. And think about it, even the IPL-bound Ten Doeschate hasn't taken a ball out of the circle yet. What hope has poor Edgar got? Oh, and I should mention, when he was diving before, he actually injured his arm a little bit as well, so he has even less hope. So in front of Stuart Broad is an injured Dutch amateur bowler, and if he can stop him scoring runs, he wins. If it's only a single, it's a super over. But if they get 2 runs, the Dutch will win. Let's see what happened. You see Broad decided to bowl straight, probably to lessen the chance of a run through to the keeper from a wide ball. The ball is hit back to Broad again. At this point, he should be the world's leading expert on fielding in his follow through. He takes the ball cleanly, and then he throws it, and he misses the stumps again. And for the first time in this over, the ball leaves the 30-yard circle because of his throw. Now, Collingwood should have been closer to the stumps, and Broad should have waited for him anyway. But none of that happened. So Broad has bowled an absolutely great T20 death over, and missed 5 chances to dismiss a Dutch player, or even just get a dot ball. This over is a great moment in cricket. It is one of the best upsets we have ever had in our game, and coming down to one of the craziest last overs that you will ever see. Stuart Broad is a lot of things, but mostly he's a creator of great moments. Chances are that you remember him for something very striking. It may be a great spell, one terrible innings, something incredibly funny or painful, but you have that moment, and that is because Stuart Broad's career has produced a lot of 2 things: wickets and craziness. Stuart Broad is simply the most ridiculous figure in cricket, and I don't mean that to downplay what he has done as a player. I mean that somehow the stupidest parts of our game have always managed to attach themselves to him again and again. His career has been one long what the fuck moment. There have been a couple of better cricketers, and a lot worse, but there have rarely been cricketers this consistently funny or newsworthy. But like, this video is long, but I will miss out on several of your favourite Broad moments, because otherwise this would be longer than an Andy Warhol film. This article is actually underselling Stuart Broad. There are frankly more than 38 times Stuart Broad was the best. His ability to be funny, strange and captivating is out of this world. Like, here is Broad getting involved in the Jofra Damas craze. This man knows memes. This man is a meme. He may not be the greatest cricketer of all time, or even in his own team, but he is clearly cricket's first true meme king. Stuart Broad's coming of age was really in the Ashes of 2009, when he was really playing as an all-rounder. In fact, in 2009, he played 3 test matches where he batted at number 7. This is a thing that happened. It ended when he had to come in and bat before lunch on day 1 of a test. But that Ashes was his coming out party. He struggled with the ball all series, and then when it looked like Australia might steal the last test and the series, Broad took 4 for 8 in 16 balls, and Australia were gone. But that isn't what I want to focus on here. No, I want to look at something far greater. That's all well and good, but you've probably forgotten the Ashes 2009. In fact, you're probably far more interested in something else, like, I don't know, the fact that Stuart Broad invented something in cricket called the celebrapeel. And if you don't know what that is, allow me to show it to you. This is Lewis Gregory. He bowls a good ball that hits the pads. He appeals for the LBW and is given it. But look again, Lewis Gregory does not appeal. He celebrates the wicket, and he never looks back at the umpire. A celebrapeel is when you appeal by claiming the wicket. It's against the playing conditions and the laws of the game. And yet cricket has allowed Broad, and now many other bowlers around the world, to do this again and again. It's just basically an unnecessary thing. And yet our sport seems unable to enforce its own conditions and laws. Look at this. Stuart Broad strikes Roston Chase on the pads and celebrates it like he has bowled him. At this moment, I ask you, does Broad even know that the umpire exists? LBW is no longer an umpire-led dismissal, it's Broad-led. And being that Broad has done more of these than anyone else, and has also taken more wickets than, most of the people that have ever existed, this entire thing is now attached to him. Broad didn't invent it, not the phrase, not the action itself, but it's Broad who has made the style and name popular. And I don't think anyone doubts that. This phrase has gone from cricket Twitter through to the commentary box, and it's now just a cricket phrase. Broad's wickets, exuberance, and rule breaking has done that. I briefly talked about Broad's international origin story earlier, but it goes back a lot deeper than that. He was bred from another test cricketer. Chris Broad was a stoic, top order player who actually overperformed with the bat in test matches. But mostly he was one of those left-handers people ignore when talking about how pretty southpaws are, and someone who scored at a very slow pace. Outside of being incredibly slow, he's mostly remembered for having a terrible temper, like when he made 139 at the SCG and then smashed his stumps out when he was dismissed. And sometimes in sports writing, if there is a father and son, you remember what the father did and you make this big leap and say the kid is following the old man's footsteps. Except for the fact that Broad has mentioned this as well. Chris Broad's career was actually ended because of their repeated anger outbursts and showing dissent when he was dismissed, which of course is now very funny as he's a match referee and has to deal with players like him and his son. In fact, this is the only time I'm aware of where a test player was docked his pocket money by his father in a match. And when you look at Chris Broad's record compared to other openers of his era, it's clear that he was a very good player who only managed 25 tests. It's not a sky-high average, but this is very good for the 80s and 90s. Not a single opener during his career averaged 50. So England discarded a hell of a player. And weirdly, of all the places in the world where Chris Broad is most remembered, it's Australia. He made 6 test hundreds, and 4 of them were there. And he made them slow and ugly and won Ashes with them. So, Australians never really forgot about all of those things they don't like. Especially as it would be the last Ashes that England won for, decades. And weirdly enough, it was Australia where Stuart Broad, the international cricketer, was kind of conceived. Because before he had a year away playing club cricket in Melbourne, Broad was a batter who bowled a little bit of medium pace in England. But then he got to Melbourne and people started sledging him, partly because of his father and partly because he was a posh, tall English guy in the western suburbs of Melbourne. I actually played a lot of cricket around Hoppers Crossing and I can confirm they sledge everyone. It was a hard place to play cricket for anyone. And my dad was not an England test player. Essentially the people that Broad played against, and probably with, sledged him into being a faster bowler, if nothing else, and maybe a tougher cricketer. And this isn't just me saying this, this is what Broad has said before. By his own admission, it changed him as a cricketer. However, it's not just the fact that he played in Australia that things changed. When Stuart Broad grew up, his childhood heroes were Australians. It's an incredible thing for an English cricketer to admit that. It also tells you how far that team had fallen. But there was clearly a lot of Australia that had shaped Broad's game. So let's just recap all this quickly. Broad Sr. was angry, Broad Jr. was angry, and Australia was still angry almost 20 years after Chris had won the Ashes that they still took it out on Stuart Broad. Oh, and one of the sledges that Broad received in Australia was Baywatch. You know, because of the blonde hair, I assume. So all of those Glenn McGrath spells that Broad watched, and all those sledges about his father and being compared to someone running in slow motion on the beach, helped Broad become the cricketer he is. And of course, that's more hilarious because Broad then goes on to beat Australia. They helped create the monster that ate them. You might have noticed that I glanced over quickly that Stuart Broad started his professional career as a batter. It's a big deal though, isn't it? Because he's very much not a batter right now. As an under 17, he opened the batting for Leicestershire and Rutland and made some runs. He batted 6 at times as a professional, and that continued even as he played for England in 2009, where they tried him as a number 7 in test matches. It's hard to know how much of this was just them hoping or just situational, but he did it in 3 matches, so it certainly wasn't an accident. It didn't last long, perhaps because in the third and final test where he did it, England fell apart at the top and Broad was batting before lunch on day 1. I think it was clear at this point that England thought they had a potential all-rounder, and Broad gave them plenty of reason to believe. This is his highest scores over the first part of his career. You can see quite a few decent knocks here, and this one that just looks batshit crazy insane. It is, without doubt, one of the weirdest innings that has ever been played by anyone, and of course, it was played by Stuart Broad. In fact, Broad's top score is better than Damien Martin, Quinton de Kock, Johnny Bairstow, Dinesh Chandimal, Ashwell Prince, Josh Butler. I mean, I'm just picking random names that I didn't see above him on this list. Some of them are still playing, so perhaps some of them will go past him. But there are plenty of incredibly respected, experienced test match batters who have existed in our game who have a lower best score than Stuart Broad does. In fact, he currently has the 284th personal best score in a test match. Now, anyone can get lucky. And this was Broad's only big innings. So we should check it out, of course. First, you need to have a look at the bowlers, right? Syed Ajmal and Wahab Riaz alone would make this good, but look, 2 of the best seamers of that era. If you're going to make runs, this is some incredible attack to do it against. But, and this is a whopping juicy giant but, when you hear the names Amir and Asif together, you think of spot fixing and jail and all the bad things. And that's because that all happened to them in England. It happened at Lord's, like Broad's innings did. In fact, actually it happened in that same year, in that same test, because on day 1 of the 3rd over, Amir overstepped, and in the 10th over, Asif overstepped. In the 39th over, Stuart Broad came out to bat. Broad's score is the 2nd highest ever score batting at number 9 or lower, and he's also the all-time leading tail-end run scorer in the bottom 3. And this was his crowning achievement, his magnum opus. But the thing is, how can you take any of this seriously when at the same time he made these runs, 2 of the people who bowled to him would end up in prison because of how they bowled in that match? This is an extremely Stuart Broad situation. It's very possible that those no balls aside, they tried very hard, and Broad's innings and incredible partnership with Jonathan Trott is completely legit. But it's just very Stuart Broad to play one of the greatest tail-end innings in Test match cricket history and have it overshadowed almost entirely by something so massive, rather than root mass, which was a creative way of suggesting a player wasn't that good. In Broad's case, we have butt mass. That's the end of part 1 of Stuart Broad, but as you may have already guessed, he had a very long career. There's so much more Stuart Broad yet to come.